Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just wanted to let you know that the webinar will be starting in 3 minutes. Thank you. Good morning. We'll be starting in a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Commission of Canada's webinar series on integrating psychological health and safety in the workplace. Today's webinar topic is mentally healthy workplaces in the legal sector. My name is Tina Corey, and I'm a program manager on the workplace team with the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and I have the pleasure of introducing today's webinar and speakers. Just before we get started, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. I invite you to send any questions or comments using the chat feature, which can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you don't see it, look for a little icon that looks like a bubble. It says chat. It's in the upper right-hand side. And you can click on that, and the window should appear for you on the right-hand side next to the PowerPoint slides. We encourage you, when you are sending your questions, if you can please use the drop-down menu and select all panelists so the questions go to myself as well as the presenter, and I will ask the questions on your behalf. This webinar is also being recorded, and it will be posted on the Mental Health Commission website in the webinar archive section following the presentation early next month. Also, due to the large number of participants today, we have muted all of your phone lines just to eliminate any background noise. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers for today's webinar. Our host, Sapna Mahajan, is the Director of Prevention and Promotion on the Workplace team with the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Also joining us today is Karen Bell. Karen serves in a national role at McCarthy Tétrault LLP as the Senior Director, Professional and Client Education. She's responsible for developing and delivering a broadly based capabilities curriculum under a platform called McCarthy Tétrault Advance, which includes legal and practice skills, as well as client development and leadership skills. Her mandate also includes delivering programming to support the continuing professional development of in-house counsel and business executives at the firm's clients. Karen, a lawyer for over 30 years, she is a practice management expert and educator who has worked with law firms and legal departments to drive productivity and growth by focusing on efficiency and client service, building resilience to risk, and developing business strategically. Karen has been active in the legal community throughout her career in a number of ways. In particular, she is on the advisory panel of the Mental Health and Wellness in the Legal Professional Program, which we'll be focusing on today in today's webinar. I'd also like to introduce Ken Ferdine, who is a General Counsel, Secretary to the Board, and a member of the leadership team with Deloitte LLP. During his tenure with Deloitte, Ken has held responsibilities for the firm's Corporate Responsibility Program, and presently he serves on the Deloitte Foundation Board of Directors. Ken is a leader in the legal profession and the general counsel community in particular. He is a member of the Association of Canadian General Counsel and is a frequent speaker and panel member on topics related to the role and challenges of the general counsel, diversity, and in-house practice management. In 2013, he was recognized by Canadian Lawyer magazine as one of Canada's top 25 most influential lawyers and judges in Canada. Working with other Canadian General Counsel, Ken was a founding member of Legal Leaders for Diversity and Inclusion, and he now serves as president. Ken is also active and engaged leader in the community, and he has received many awards, including the Queen's Jubilee Medal. I'd like to welcome our distinguished and experienced speakers today, and thank you all for joining us. I'm now going to turn things over to you, Sapna, to get things started.
Thank you, Tina, and hello, everybody from across the country and around the world. I just wanted to start to say a few words about the Commission. We are a national body. We were established in 2007 with a 10-year mandate, and recently we were renewed for another 10 years. And really our role is to transform the mental health system, or should I say systems. And our focus on our team is around workplace mental health, to raise awareness about the notion of health and safety and expanding that to mean mental health and physical health, to gather evidence and develop tools. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about workplace mental health, but with the lens of the legal sector. Why are we talking about workplace mental health? Well, more than 500,000 Canadians in any given week are not at work because of a mental health problem or illness. And I imagine that number to be much greater because this is the ones that are reported. We spend more waking hours in the workplace than anywhere else. So more than 60% of our waking hours are spent at work. And now with the advancements in technology, that line between work and home becomes very blurred. And as somebody who carries around a phone and is always checking emails, I know that really that work-life balance is more and more challenging each day. Really the health or the harm created in workplaces has a huge impact on ourselves, our families, communities, and societies as a whole. But what's more astounding is the economical impact. It's actually costing our economy more than $51 billion a year, and $20 billion of those dollars are directly related to workplace costs. Mental health problems and illnesses are the #1 cause of disability in Canada and account for nearly 30% of disability claims, and in some sectors that's as high as 50%. But it actually accounts for 70% of the disability costs. And we know that the longer that someone is away because of illness, the less chance there is of a successful return. So if someone is away for 6 months, there's a 50% chance they're likely to come back. But as soon as it hits 9 months, that drops to about 10%. The next slide, which is 2 graphics, and the numbers aren't important as much as respiratory is one of the more common disability claims in organizations across the country. So that's the left side of the 2 charts. The middle one is all the different kinds of disability episodes people might be away from work. And on the right side of both charts is mental illness. And what I just want to highlight in this graphic is that even though respiratory may be more common in many sectors, you'll actually see that the episode length in which people are off of work for mental illness is astronomical in length as well as in cost. So really it's an important piece to look at. One of the underlying issues more than costs and work-life balance is the issue around stigma. It doesn't matter where in society, whether we talk about workplaces or our homes or schools, stigma seems to be the underlying issue. It's why people don't recognize they have an issue, the self-stigma, or why they don't seek help and they don't speak up, and why we actually don't help colleagues or actually take that proactive action is around the stigma. And lawyers are no different. They're not immune to this reality. And really, we've actually seen through some of our research is that there's quite a bit of mistrust within the legal profession and increased stigma as well as a mistrust of EAPs. So really, the cost of inaction is huge. That could be absenteeism, disability claims, injuries, grievances, turnover. But one thing that also has a huge impact, and really it's hard to quantify, is what this image is showing. And I really like this picture because it's trying to depict presentism, which is people are at work. They're physically present. They're coming into the office, but they're not effective. They're not well. They're not productive. And not only is that having a negative impact on themselves, but it might be having a negative impact on their teams, their colleagues, as well as their supervisors and managers. And in an environment like the legal sector, where it is so important, the work that you're doing and the clients you're serving and the people, we need people to be present, productive, healthy, and it's really the brains we're relying on. It's the intellectual knowledge that we need to harness. It's the greatest asset is the people and our brains. So the legal profession, we work across the country with many industries, many sectors, small, medium, large, and businesses, and the legal community is one that is not immune to all the facts, the statistics, and the stigma we've talked about today. The legal environment has its own set of unique hazards and psychological risks. And when we say legal sector, we're talking about judges, lawyers, paralegal, administrative assistants, law students, court reporters. We're really talking about all the people that play a role in the legal profession. And we know that working within the legal profession is a career filled often that can be stressful, that can have challenges. It can be an anxiety-filled environment, and there can be quite a bit of expectations. And so the Commission hopes to work with this profession to try to create a psychologically healthy and safe environment. In 2015, the Canadian Bar Association, along with FEL, Let's Talk, and Mood Disorders Society of Canada, developed a great program called the Mental Health and Wellness in the Legal Profession. It's a free online course, and you can see on the slide the link to the English and French version. But really, it was developed to look at some of the unique needs of the legal profession and how do we raise awareness and develop the competencies and skills for all kinds of people in the legal profession. I won't go into detail because we actually have experts on the phone who can speak to this much more eloquently than myself. So thank you very much for your time, and I will now pass it over to Karen, who will take you through the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Sapna. Today, Ken and I are going to share with you some of our experiences and insights about mental illness in the many different workplaces of our profession and attempt to chart a path of action for all of us to share. Now, a number of you sent in some very interesting questions in advance of the program, and we do want to say at the outset, we don't have all the answers, but with today's discussion, we hope to give you some direction as to some of the resources that are available to assist. And what I'd like to do is start off by building on the statistics that Sapna shared in her introduction on the incidence of mental illness, because I think before we can really come to some meaningful solutions, we need to understand what we're dealing with. So let me set the scene by sharing with you some of our own statistics in the legal profession. Tina, if you could just advance the slide. We know that many of the members of the profession suffer from a variety of mental illnesses, and it's largely around mood disorders and addictions. But I wanted to share with you two studies in particular that really help us grasp some of the challenges we're dealing with. First, going back 4 years ago, Ipsos Reid did a survey for the CBA, the Canadian Bar Association, where a number of judges, lawyers, and students across the country, some 5,000, were surveyed, and 1,200 responded. What this was a survey about health and wellness, and we looked at 14 particular characteristics. And what was fascinating and sad was that ranked most high were things like stress and burnout, it being the most prevalent concern at 92% of the survey population, followed by anxiety at 86%, and then depression following as the sixth among the 14 parameters. And that was really a useful survey to start to guide the CBA in looking at what kinds of solutions might be valuable. I'm going to speak about that in a moment. As Sapna did, it ultimately led, among other things, to the development of the online program. But when we looked at that, that survey looked at causes of health issues. Most recently, and really quite fresh out the door this year, was a survey done last year in the States. And why am I talking about an American survey? It's because the legal profession walks and talks very similarly across the continent. And so what we see happening in the States is a very valuable guidepost for us. And we don't often have these detailed surveys. So we want to draw your attention to a survey done by the American Bar Association and the Hazeldean Betty Ford Foundation. They surveyed 13,000 lawyers from across 19 states in the U.S., and their findings there were 28%, that's just between a quarter and a third, reported depression, 19% reported anxiety issues, and 23% reported stress issues. And I bring this to your attention because it's saying the same things, the things that we know anecdotally, the things that we learned about in the earlier CBA survey. And it's important because it's hitting us squarely between the eyes. And I want to also add that this is the same story, in fact, worse in Australia. There's another survey done of lawyers there by a group called PsychSafe, and they're really dealing with a crisis situation in Australia of 1 in 2 Australians suffering from mental illness. So if you are trying to deal with this issue in your workplace and running up against people who are very naive on the issue or skeptical that it's a problem, please share this information because this is very real and it squarely showcases the issue for us. Now, why is the incidence so high for lawyers? I wanted to share two reasons today, because again, one is more obvious than the other. Again, Sapna referred to our very demanding practice. We all know it's fast, competitive, lots of change underfoot. That all leads to stress and uncertainty. The high stakes involved, you know, whether you're practicing criminal law, family law, business law, there's emotional and physical tolls taken as we attempt to do our best in our work. So that primes us for an exposure to any kind of illness, but particularly mental illness. It creates vulnerabilities. But I thought that many of you may not be familiar with another basis for why there's a high incidence, and that's some very interesting information that comes out of the research by Dr. Larry Richards, and some of you may be familiar with his work. I commend to you his website, lawyerbrain.com. Larry is a lawyer himself, but a practicing psychologist, and over the last 20-some years, itching up to more like 30 now. He's surveyed or done assessments with lawyers, thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And so he is able to draw some fascinating conclusions. His assessment is called the Caliper Profile, and it measures 18 personality traits. And what he found was that we lawyers stand out. There are outliers for 6 of the traits. That means that we either score way beyond the general population as too much or way beyond the population as too low. Now, there's an article on his website that we'll be posting the link for after the program that gives you more details about the rest of the traits. But I wanted to focus on 3 today because, again, we believe that this is why we're more prone to the incidents. First, we score really high on autonomy. We like control. We don't like change that's imposed on us. And I don't know if this comes from our education or simply the environment, but that is a reality. Second, even higher, we score more than the average population on skepticism. Now, again, where does this come from? It's certainly key to our problem-solving abilities. We're trained to dig, to probe, to test theories, situations, arguments, positions. But this skepticism has a dark side. It also creates a very negative mindset, one that can be cynical, pessimistic, and critical. And if you're coming into a situation where you're vulnerable to a mental illness with stress and depression and anxiety, this is simply exacerbated because we are less inclined to seek help or be open to getting better. The third trait is we score much lower than the average population on resilience. The low resilience amplifies the effects of change, so that makes us more prone to feeling more stress, to making more mistakes, to have a harder time bouncing back. So I thought it would be interesting for you to have that context and as a suggestion on why we have this incidence. And further, that Dr. Richards found that as a group, we have the highest rate of depressive disorders among a number of other occupational groups he surveyed, and actually suggests that of 104 other groups, lawyers suffer 2 to 4 times more depressive orders, and that we are 5 to 15 times higher with respect to rates of anxiety and phobias. So that's my backdrop of the stats that put it on the table that we have some real issues and where these may be coming from. I just want to make another comment with respect to the barriers. Again, Sapna mentioned the issue of stigma. You know, stigma has 2 pieces to it, and what I have learned in the course of much research and discussion with experts is the stigma comes from oneself. Most importantly, it is a harsh self-judging in a sense that, you know, hey, I'm a lawyer and I'm schooled and I'm capable and successful and I should be able to handle this stuff. And that sense tends to keep us from reaching out and helping ourselves or helping others. And the second aspect of stigma being, you know, others in the community. I mean, there's people who think that you just, you know, go to sleep, wake up, and you'll be fine. So there's a lack of understanding, and that really is what underscores the biggest barrier. We don't understand mental illness enough, what it is, what it looks like, how to help people with it, how to accommodate. So with those barriers, you know, we have a job to do, and again, as Sapna mentioned, the cost of not doing something is huge, and it's the productivity or lack thereof, a lack of engagement, as she mentioned, the presenteeism, that gives rise to also risk, whether it's misconduct, malpractice, you know, really poor behavior. But there's also the compassionate side, the human case, and so we want to be mindful of our colleagues who are struggling and the emotional toll that takes on them and their families, and so we've got, you know, lots at stake to work hard together to overcome these barriers. And so that leads me to the Canadian Bar Association's online program that's been introduced to you. It really was the objective of tackling both the stigma and the lack of understanding that the CBA, in conjunction with Mood Disorders and Let's Talk, worked with a number of subject matter experts to create this program. And for those of you who have not gone in, logged in, and done it, it's about an hour and a half of your time. It is divided up into pieces, and it's complemented with the most compelling human stories of 5 lawyers and 1 articling student. And this is where we're going to get to building a better management of the stigma. They are sharing with you what they went through and how stigma prevented them from reaching out. It's just a start, but it is certainly a very valuable way to start to better tackle the stigma and build our understanding. And I wanted to share with you that as a member of the advisory panel, I went to our management at the firm and was delighted to have their full support to promote this module to every member of our firm, lawyer at every level, every staff member. We're engaged in a campaign that started in the fall, going through this year, and it is now part of our onboarding system. And while the stories come from lawyers and a student, it really does set the context for our environment and every player in it. So I do commend it to you. It's free, it's available. Yes, you're asked for information when you log in, but anyone around the world can be taking the value from it. So it's a very important tool, and it's a great starting point. I'm going to turn the mic over to Ken now, who's going to share with you some other initiatives. He's had a leadership role in the corporate sector. Ken?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to thank you, Karen, for inviting me to speak with you on this panel. I got to tell the group that's on the line that Karen's an expert, and my friends at McCarthy here have done an outstanding job in terms of addressing their minds to mental health issues, so congratulations to them. I wanted to bring 2 perspectives. One is sort of a perspective from a general counsel and a member of Legal Leaders for Diversity, which I'll talk about in a minute, and also as a leader in a large professional services firm in Canada. I lead a group of about 18 people here at Deloitte in my general counsel office, and I want to give some perspectives from that angle as well. The first item is just up on the slide. Is there was a report. I chaired the panel appointed by the federal government a few years back, and we produced this report in January of 2013. And this report is really was after a fairly significant time spent dealing with private sector employers around disabilities. And we interviewed over 70 companies during the course of our work and ultimately produced this report. One thing that was kind of interesting from that report was that not in any one of the 70 companies that we interviewed was there a C-suite member who identified a disability, including mental health issues. So it was kind of interesting there in terms of understanding there's significant stigma around the issue of disabilities in general and also mental health issues. The next slide is what's come out of that report. We recommended to the federal government that they fund an organization which is called Canadian Business Sensibilities. I serve on the board of that organization. That's really around focusing in on the abilities associated with disabilities and creating a better environment for people with disabilities in the private sector. There's a number of employers, significant employers, who are members of that organization, and that organization will continue to grow. The third thing is something that maybe is of more relevance, if you could flip the slide, and that is around something called Legal Leaders for Diversity. I know there's some of my colleagues from Legal Leaders for Diversity on the line today, and I wanted to welcome them. But this is an organization that started about just under 5 years ago. We're coming up on our 5th anniversary. And it's a group now of about 100 general counsel from across Canada, and on that slide you'll see some familiar names. I'm very proud of the general counsel community in terms of their leadership around driving inclusiveness into the legal profession. And as the buyers of services from law firms, we've had a significant influence in law firms in terms of dealing with issues of diversity and inclusiveness. And we're pretty proud of, I think, some of the change that's been created. I just wanted all of you to know that there's a great appetite at the General Council level around diversity. For instance, you'll note, or maybe you can't read the slide, but we've broadly defined sexual orientation to actually include the spectrum of sexual orientation and the gender identity. And so our definition of disability is actually, or of diversity, is very inclusive. And we've made that clear to law firms and to others that this is an important issue to the General Counsel offices in Canada. And this unique approach, I think, has changed the markers when it comes to dealing with diversity and in all of its shapes and sizes. So that's Legal Leaders for Diversity, and that organization continues to grow, moving into its 5th year. The next slide. So what happened here was that Karen had developed 4 topics, and we're going to tag team on these topics and go through some experiences, some things that we've learned, and talk about these 4 issues. So Karen, maybe you want to kick this off.
Thanks, Ken. Yes, and just so everyone is aware, the 4 topics we're going to look at are actually canvassed in the CBA program, and so we thought that would work as a good framework for discussion. And I'm going to look to the first 2 points and just have to repeat. Our starting point is really understanding what we're dealing with, understanding and building awareness across the organization, and you need leadership to do that. And one of the things that we did, in addition to promoting the CBA program as well as other resources that I'll talk about a little later, we went to our leaders across the firm in every office, at every level, formal leadership positions, informal, including staff, and we said, we need you to tell your story, whether you've had a personal illness yourself or a family member or dealt with a colleague. And let me tell you that, we use things like, water cooler discussions, but email communication. But having that smaller regional focus where people know each other and being very candid about the challenges really help people to get talking, and that is the most important action you can take. Get people talking, it was a very powerful tool to share within. And the other part of the talking that we've embraced at the firm is we're big supporters of the Bell Let's Talk initiative, and that comes up every January where you talk, text, or tweet. And we had, candidly, a lot of fun while we were raising awareness around mental illness. So those are some of the things that we're doing to try to take our first steps along building a more supportive culture.
Yeah, and Karen, just following on that, I mean, I think a common theme is around the importance of leadership. I think inclusive leadership styles, I don't think you can be a leader these days unless you're inclusive in your leadership style. It's that fundamentally important, and certainly we see that at Deloitte. But, work is meaningful work. I mean, productive, meaningful work is critical to one's mental health. We've defined it a little bit broader in terms of wellness at Deloitte. The importance of looking at the person as in their wholeness to understand what are their needs, what are some of the things that need to be addressed. All of those are sort of creating that safe place to talk and be a part of. So that's, and I'll touch on some of those specific examples that we're looking at in terms of how we manage our people, in terms of how we manage our workplace as well. I think from a general counsel's perspective as well, it's critically important that we understand that the value we add to the organization that is defined, that we properly planned and organized ourselves to address the needs of an organization, and that could be within government or outside of government in the private sector, that the planning part of what we do is extremely important. It allows your people to get engaged in a conversation about where they're going to add value to the organization and how they're going to control their life as much as possible in terms of the work they'll be doing within that organization. I'm a big proponent of that. I think the other thing that is important in the planning part of what we do is that I think it's important for leaders to emphasize that all of us, particularly in the legal profession, in my opinion, need to have a greater purpose. That having a greater purpose in what we do outside of work is important to how we feel about our jobs and the satisfaction we have from our careers. The second bullet I just wanted to address is just around identifying the different needs. This is important. Veterans, boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and those that will come after, there are different needs that they will have at the different stages of their lives. And all of those are important in terms of how they're going to work within your teams. And collaboration, the importance of diversity within your groups. The business case is so clear, and if you have a broad section of diversity within your team, you'll be able to spread out issues related to wellness within your group across all members of your team, including any generational differences that are there. And then finally, you know, we've got to acknowledge there's challenges that we face in terms of speed of life, the pace of work, and accelerated change. And you know, the three items that you mentioned, Karen, in terms of not liking change, the negative mindset, and low resilience, those are all challenged in the workplace these days. Huge change going on, huge speed, technology, how we work, how we interact with clients. All of those things are change things that you need to manage as a leader within your teams to create an environment where people feel as though they're valued, a part of the team, and that you can look at them and their wellness in a way that allows them to be productive.
Okay, Tina, if you could move over. Ken, do you want to address how we believe we need to better educate our leadership and staff?
Yeah, well, I think that the leadership part of it comes up when you and I were preparing for this. Leadership is key, and I like to believe that lawyers are great leaders and can set examples, and part of this is really around being both visible and knowledgeable. This program is about creating, hopefully, greater knowledge amongst the legal profession, but we need to continue to talk about it. We need to reduce the stigma, and to that end, call out the negative attitudes and comments or speculation. Leaders need to know their people and build the trust and create the safe environment for the people within their teams. There's also the importance of inclusion, and I've mentioned this before, but it's critically important that to be a great leader, you need to be inclusive in your leadership style. Talent, you know, I think the thing I find from a general counsel within a large organization is that we're constantly interacting with frontline workers around, but in particular in this case, human resource folks, and they need to be trained and understand, but at the end of the day, lawyers play a significant role in terms of how talent is dealt with within an organization, and I think that leadership is very important. That comes from being knowledgeable about issues related to mental health.
I want to echo everything Ken said. Again, the success of our initiative, which is in its infant stages at the firm, has been the support of our senior leadership and leadership all down through the ranks. It's when the frontline workers see that leaders are sharing their vulnerability and sharing concern and inviting conversation that you really start to make some headway. Now, that means that leaders need to understand what they're dealing with. And again, I saw questions coming in and, you know, wanting some specific answers. I suggest that the best way to start is to become familiar with what the issues are. So again, promoting that online program. But there's something that all of us have access to, all of us in terms of lawyers and staff and family, and that is a variety of employment assistance programs if you're in a larger organization where that's provided, but also as members of our law societies in each province across Canada. We have what's called the Lawyer Assistance Program. In Ontario, it's Member Assistance Program, and it has a wide range of resources. And actually just today, you know, for those of you in Ontario, you would have received an email from Homewood Health through the Law Society reminding us about the variety of resources. I have found that when I talk about these things that people kind of roll their eyes and are skeptical to say, oh, gee, I don't think it's very good. I do encourage you to learn more about them, to have representatives come to your office and share how they operate and what is available to you, and really prime people so that they're more comfortable to reach out and use those. They're there for you, free of charge. The next thing is stepping it up. The Mental Health Leadership Certificate Program, which was built at Queen's University in Ontario in conjunction with Chappell, well known to you as an employee assistance program provider, and Bell, was developed. It's a 3-part program, and it culminates in a certificate. It's both online and in class, and it positions leaders to better understand what you're dealing with and to better understand how to handle it. It doesn't mean we become trained psychologists, but it does mean we learn how to have the conversations that help those suffering with a problem start to talk, which is the first step to the path of getting some assistance. And this is something that Bell has all their managers, including their lawyers, take, and they've put thousands of their team through this program. And it is something that we are having our leaders go through, all of our services leaders and a certain group of our lawyer leaders, so that's over 100 people in our firm, will be taking this program in June of this year. And I'm very proud of that with the idea that they will be better equipped to handle issues. And finally, something that I know colleagues at Norton Rose are doing, and we are looking at, is a mental health first aid for leaders. So those who are on the front lines, typically certain people in HR or perhaps lawyer leaders in your organization, learn, much like the St. John's ambulance, what do you do and how to use a defibrillator. These are the next level, not meant for everyone, but for those to handle more crisis situations. You see the bullet on the importance of people networks. Ken, that was going to your point about feeling safe to talk in your workplace, right?
Yes, it was. I mean, I probably I missed that. That was from the was that from the first slide? No, it's one thing that I think that we've done at Deloitte is understand that the people's networks that fall within our diversity program are critically important. I'm the executive sponsor of the Persons with Disability Network at Deloitte. And we, just as by way of an example, we did our launch of the network, which was just outstanding. And after the launch, I had an employee come to see me to say that this employee had never said this to anybody within the firm, but they suffered from mental health issues and had for years. And this was the first time that she felt comfortable talking about her mental health issues. She is a top performer within the firm. To not know that, but to know it now, is critically important to making her even a higher performing employee within the firm and a much safer environment in which she can work. I think these people networks are very important, and if you have the critical mass within your organization to do it, it's a wonderful way to surface up issues and to address things that need to be addressed within the organization.
And I would just add on to that, for those of you who are in a smaller organization, something that we did last year as part of basically a lunch and learn on care for the caregivers, we were at small tables, like 3 or 4 of us, and we were encouraged to talk about what would it be if you're caring for someone that would help you in your day. And we set up a challenge, actually, to encourage each of us to do something. And I recall a colleague who said, well, I have to care for a very special needs child, and you know what, I never have time for myself, and I would love to have a bubble bath. And we said, okay, this is, we're going to do whatever we can to help you have time to do that. And it was just a very actually emotional experience, but to remind us all that we're human, and those things, albeit sound small, are the things that are important to people. So there's lots of ways that you can take that point that Ken has shared and apply it. We also wanted to suggest, as the next slide says, that an important thing to do is to maintain a respectful and considerate workplace. And Ken, do you want to talk about the first point?
I will, and I'll leave I think what is the best to the last, which is really around the workplace of the future. I want to talk about that on the next slide. But you know, we understand that inclusion is the thing you need to get to. In a very diverse workforce, it's not about the diversity, it's really about creating an inclusive workforce, and that requires a number of things, including your talent management strategies, but also your workplace or where you work. So just touching on the talent part of it, I think that what we've learned, and I think others have learned this as well, and there's been some things written on this, is that, you know, how we manage our employees is critically important to their wellness, and obviously wellness includes mental health. And what we're looking at is how we change our talent management strategies, where we really focus on strengths, not weaknesses, and building on strengths. And I think that's going to be a critical part about the value that people feel that they bring to the firm. I think this is critically important within the legal sector. I think too often, as you manage people, you're often prone to look at the negative or be skeptical, whereas I think really what we need to do as leaders is to focus on the positive and build up those strengths within your team. The building design part of it, I'll get to on the next slide, but I think that's key to all of this, and I think that's something that the legal profession is really going to have to get with, and that is understanding about where we work and how we work is really around how we feel and what type of job we do for our employers and for others.
And, you know, in that kind of environment, as people are busy working, there's also the aspect of just recognizing that people are making a contribution. We in our firm certainly have a framework for standout performance, WOW Awards, Bravo Awards, and those work well. But it's just day-to-day being respectful and recognizing that someone's getting the work done. We tend to think, well, that's their job. But having more conversation and reminding each other that the work they're doing is valued is very important to going to creating a positive environment. And all the experts will tell you that it is positivity that is the most powerful of tools. If you train your mind, your behavior follows. And so I commend to you, and there are many resources out there, but sifting through them, a book called The Value of Full Engagement by Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz. And Tina will be posting this on the resources page following the program. But all about being more positive. Like, stress is part of our environment, but having a more positive orientation around the stress is a very important contributor.
So those of us that are in general counsel roles, leading legal teams or part of in-house teams, whether government or private sector, we get involved in workplace investigations, talent-related matters, and the like. You know, quite often we're asked to find solutions and add value in that way, which I think we play a very valuable role. Increasingly, what I'm sensing and I've seen is the need for lawyers to be well-versed in understanding mental health issues. So often, the issues we deal with as lawyers and give advice to our clients do relate to mental health issues, and our understanding of these issues and our ability to address them and give proper advice in the context of mental illness is very important for us to provide the most value to our clients and in-house to our client.
Thanks, Ken. Just a last point on this, and I don't mean to give it short shrift there. This is a huge new area, psychological health and safety in the workplace, and there's a standard that was created by the Commission, our host today, with the Canadian Standards Council, that looks at 16 criteria in your workplace. Now, this is a voluntary standard, and it came out in 2014. There's a group of 40 companies that are in a 3-year pilot to implement it, you know, if you ask me, this should be made mandatory and not to distant future. But suffice it to say, I commend it to you. Please go to the Commission's website. There's a link at the end on the resources page and learn about it. It is a great tool to start guiding you on what you can be doing, whether you're in a 2-person office or a 2,500 employee firm or 10,000. It gives you a framework to start thinking about a more mentally healthier workplace. And then finally, under the what can we do, this is a much bigger perspective. It's really coming to appreciate better the value of wellness and balance. And what I wanted to say on this, because I really wanted to leave it to Ken, where Deloitte is doing some pretty cool stuff. It's remembering this is about humans and being humane, and also appreciating the bottom line business case that we're really, it's a huge cost for us to not be active in better managing this part of our lives. So Ken, why don't I let you share your comments?
Thank you, Karen. And I want to talk about workplace of the future, because I think this is probably the most critical thing that I've come to understand. And I know, talking to my general counsel colleagues, they're all fascinated with what we're doing at Deloitte, and I want to share a bit of that with you. But wellness is something that that you need to focus on, also in terms of your practices, your policies, the thing you do, how you train your leaders to manage people. And as I said earlier, our new talent management structure that we're entering into is really around emphasizing the positive, but also more constant, more meaningful feedback, more 360 kind of work around the employees. And I know that sounds like it'll take a lot of time, but I think we understand that talent is what we have, and that's so critically important. You've got to spend time on it. And I think the more touches you have with an employee, the more feedback you give to them, the more trust that you build with that employee, the better able you are to deal with mental health issues when they arise. That's something that as leaders we must do. We must be in touch with our people. The workplace of the future, though, is, I think, critical to this. And I got to say, my observation of the legal profession is that we're very slow on the uptake. And I think part of that is a fear we have around the role that we have as professionals in the legal profession, and the three items that Karen mentioned at the start. We're moving into a new workplace where it's going to have different ways to work. It's not, there's no cubicles, believe it or not. There's private places to work. There's more public places to work. There's collaboration areas. There's a variety of forms. I just walked through our new workplace, which we're moving into shortly. And the variety of places where you can work really suits the different nature of how people work. We all work differently. The days of working in an office with a closed door are gone, in my opinion. And the beauty of this is that it really creates a better opportunity for people to find the way that they work best within what they're doing. And I think that in the legal profession, this is really important. And I think if you have the opportunity to look at how you can shake things up in terms of creating a workplace of the future, you should absolutely think about that and reach out and talk to people who are involved with it. How we work, where we work is critical to wellness. And when you have a space that encourages collaboration, interaction, movement, all of that, and how it can be adapted to your work needs for that particular thing that you're working on, it's hugely important. And what I'm finding is that although there are some people, for instance, people who might be more introverted than others, there are places they can work and be productive, and yet there's others that really welcome this. And I think it's pushing the envelope with lawyers, and that's going to be a very useful thing in terms of looking at the wellness of our people. And one other thing we have there as well is, we have stand-up workstations and also treadmills for people to be on if they're on a telephone call, things to keep them active and moving. So it's something that I'm very excited about. I know that a lot of my general counsel colleagues are very interested to understand what we're doing, and I've spoken to some of them that are doing exactly the same thing. And so this is the way of the future. And I think lawyers in particular need to get on it and understand how it can work to their benefits. Now, that's the workplace of the future, which I think is critical to wellness. I think the other part of it, though, is technology. We understand that we're all going through 365, 24/7. But I think it's how you view technology and how leaders use it and the signals we send to our people that is really important. Technology, of course, is both an enabler, but it's also a caller. And I think it's how we choose to treat it. But leaders in particular, and I put this out for all lawyers because I believe that we're all leaders, we need to set a better example in terms of how we use technology, how we turn it off, how we manage our people's and our own personal time, weekends, evenings, holidays. And again, what I've learned is leaders can talk about this all they want, but if they don't actually put it into action, it'll never happen. And so you need to, as a leader, you need to be talking about the time you spend going to watch your daughter run cross-country, or to go to personal events and tell them you're just not available, and take that personal stand on these things. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is a global leader in terms of the use of technology, and she was in New York for meetings. She went to have dinner at a restaurant. She said it was amazing that every single table, everybody was using their personal devices. It's pathetic, to be honest, and that's how she put it. And she spoke about that when she spoke at the conference, to say we have to take ownership over this stuff and get it in the right perspective, because it goes to our wellness and our mental health. I think that at the end of the day, lawyers from all sorts of places are under stress. The profession is changing, technology challenges, demands of clients, the globalization, I could go on and on. These are all things that lawyers need to understand are happening, and there are places, and that will have an impact on both their wellness, which includes mental health. And we need to be very focused on this topic and understand that there are things that we can do in how we practice, how we manage, how we work, that will create a difference in terms of our wellness. And I think that I'd just like to say, in terms of closing off this item 4, is that I've learned a lot from what McCarthy's and other firms are doing around this topic, and I think that the more we talk about it, the more that leaders talk about it, and I know that the Legal Leaders for Diversity will be talking more about this, the more that we'll see change, and that's for the better. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Ken. I will just simply add one more point is, you know, remember, it's our legal profession immediately, it's our staff, it's our colleagues, it's our families. We're all impacted. So the strategies that we've shared with you today, or some of our experiences, relate to this large group, which is what Sapna said at the start. The legal sector is a very large family. Tina?
Thank you so much, Karen and Ken. You just had quite a number of strategies and tips. That was just great. I just wanted to put up this resource page. So again, a link to the actual program, assistance programs, articles and research, as well as training programs as well, and the national standard. And while we're on this page, I had a quick question for Sapna. Can you just give a quick overview of what the national standard is, and you know, why should organizations, what are the benefits of implementing it?
My 1-minute answer is, firstly, thank you, Karen, for talking about it. But it was released in 2013. It's free. It's voluntary. It's only about 14 pages. However, there's a lot of appendices, which makes it overwhelming. But it's 14 pages, and it can be downloaded for free from the link that's on the slide, www.csa.ca/Z1003. And really, it's just a set of tools, not rules, around what an organization can do and what they can put into place, a bit of a process an organization can take over a few years to integrate psychological health and safety within their health and safety system. So it is often the lead of human resources or occupational health and safety who takes this tool and implements it. And there are law firms and similar organizations across the country using it, and we're seeing it's having a huge benefit on really changing the culture. So if you want more information, please visit our website, and you can contact myself, and I'm happy to help. And that will be my quick 1-minute answer.
Well, thank you very much, Sapna. Karen, quick question for you. Can you please repeat the name and author of the book by Jim Lord?
Yes, it was The Power of Full Engagement by Jim Lohr, L-O-E-H-R, and Tony Schwartz. It's The Free Press, published in 2003, and we'll be putting that information up on the resources page. Perfect.
And maybe just a quick question, Karen, about taking the course and getting accredited for it. Can you speak to that, the online program?
Yes, so the program itself is about 1.5 hours. If you watch all of the videos of the stories, it's about 6 hours. The accreditation is different in each province. I think most law societies have accredited it, so if you're in Ontario, it's up to 6 hours of professionalism. I don't believe it's accredited in British Columbia. We're working on that. But when you go online, you'll get the information as to who gives what number of credits. But it is, in most jurisdictions, it does have some number of hours for your CPD credits. I often say to people, but that's the tail wagging the dog. You will get credits, but it is very valuable to build your knowledge.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. We've had a very attentive audience. We don't have any more questions. I know our registrants who did provide a couple of questions prior to registration. I know that you've tackled a number of those topics around stigma and stress and leadership and strategy, so we do appreciate that, so thank you again.
Tina, could I just leave you with one thing, because you had mentioned there were a number of questions on stress. All of these resources on your Employee Assistance Program, the Lawyer Assistance Program, things like Practice Pro in Ontario, available to everybody, have stress buster exercises. So it's really, I just want to leave you with 3 practical things. Learning to manage stress, both to prevent it and manage through it, is about positivity, about breathing, and about mindfulness. And so if you go to these websites, you'll get lots of resources, and it's a great starting point for you and those you work with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's great. So please tune in next month on April 27th for our next webinar in our series. And we would really appreciate it if you fill out our survey that opens after you leave the webinar. It will pop up automatically on your screen. And again, on behalf of all of us, the Mental Health Commission, McCarthy, Tetro, and Deloitte, and in particular Karen and Ken and Sapna, we do thank you. Thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.